This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
This is the Morning Run, and you're here with Lynn Mark, Roshan, Kanesan and Noelle Lim. Now, amidst the fallout between Umno and Bersatu, the role of Gabungan Parti Sarawak has become more crucial in order for Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's Perikatan Nasional coalition to stay in government. Should elections, of course, be called by year end. In his two-day working visit to the state, the Prime Minister seemed to be courting Sarawak, saying that with the cooperation between Sarawak and the federal government, the state would achieve rapid progress and development to emerge as one of the most developed states in Malaysia.
Well, Sarawak certainly needs that because right now it's ranked third in having the highest number of poor families among all the states in Malaysia, despite being resource rich. Anyway, the Prime Minister also thanked Sarawak Chief Minister Datuk Patinggi Abang Johari Openg for continuing to support him as the Prime Minister, responding to Abang Johari's speech earlier that GPS gave its assurance of its support towards Muhyiddin.
But just for how far and for how long will this cooperation last? Should UMNO and BN gain momentum? Would GPS turn? For more on this morning we are speaking with Professor James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. James, thanks so much for joining us again today. Now, Dr. Abang Johari has expressed GPS's full support for Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. How likely will this support last? I mean, if elections are called, will the Sarawakian coalition throw its weight behind the PN machinery?
Good morning. So essentially, GPS has decided that they will go with whoever is in government in Putrajaya. So I'm assuming that the Sarawak election will go first, and after that we will have the general election. But I think the important thing to remember is that whatever GPS says before the general election doesn't count for much. What they'll do is that if Tan Sri Muhyiddin wins in the next general election, they'll stay with PN. But if Tan Sri Muhyiddin loses the next general election, GPS will probably go with the new winners.
So the important note will be who is in federal government. But when we take a look at GPS's own agenda and priorities, with regards to the federal government, what are those priorities, James?
So basically, GPS is after essentially three things. The first one is, of course, the Constitution Amendment to MS 63. Second is more autonomy. And third is, of course, they're looking for more money. So essentially, they're trying to get as much as possible from the Muhyiddin administration. They understand that Muhyiddin is extremely politically weak now. So that's the reason why, if you look at the past year of the PN government, Sarawak has scored major success. The biggest one and the most public one is, of course, the Muhyiddin administration asked Petronas not to contest the sales tax from Sarawak, and they end up paying nearly 2 billion ringgit to the Sarawak government. On top of that, Muhyiddin is also negotiating them on more autonomy, especially giving back powers to Sarawak in certain key areas like health and education. And of course, in his recent trip, he was discussing about the Constitution Amendment. And also an interesting thing has cropped out, which is that a couple of Sarawakians in the federal government has actually joined Bersatu, and some of them actually hold state seats in Sarawak. So there was a bit of discussion about whether these people will be allowed to stand in the next Sarawak state election under Bersatu.
Yeah, on this note, how does the political drama amongst Malay-based parties in the peninsula affecting Sarawak?
Basically, it doesn't affect Sarawak. So if you look at the three major parties, Bersatu, PAS, and UMNO, UMNO has no branches in Sarawak. Bersatu did try to set up a network in Sarawak, but they've not been very successful. PAS has been in Sarawak for a very long time, but 90% of the candidates keep losing their election deposit every time they stand for elections. So essentially, the attitude of the Sarawak leaders is that this is a fight among the Malay establishment in Peninsular Malaysia. It has very little to do with us, but we will try to benefit from the sidelines.
Now, does UMNO and Warisand Nasional have anything to offer instead to call back their old allies here?
Oh, yes. If Warisand Nasional, UMNO wins the next general election and they become part of the and they form the federal government next time, I'm quite sure GPS will join them as well.
So, but this is, of course, contingent on them winning the federal government. So, will they back any parties before that? Because right now they're with PN. Can Warisand Nasional say anything before the election to get GPS to back them instead?
No. So GPS will back whoever is in government. You have to remember, right? The best illustration of this was on the 9th of May after the vote. On the 11th of May, 2 days after, everybody started abandoning the Barisan Nasional. So this is the way it was in Malaysia. Everybody loves a winner. Nobody wants to stand next to a loser.
But I guess the question is, James, as Malay parties here in the peninsula wrestle for majority support of Malay voters, how does this racial rhetoric that is being projected affect Sabah and Sarawak's support for these parties?
Right. In terms of the Malay rhetoric, it was better in Sabah. Part of it is because the Muslim population in Sabah is stronger politically, more aggressive. And of course, UMNO has been there for a very long time. UMNO was controlling the Sabah government for more than 20 years, but it really doesn't play well in Sarawak. I think what you have in Sarawak is a sense among Sarawakians that Sarawak is quite special. Although we understand all this racial rhetoric coming out of the peninsula, we do not want to play the game. We still go for the game that we want a certain level of ethnic and religious harmony in Sarawak, and we try to stay away from the West Malaysian thing as much as possible.
You mentioned that GPS will support whoever leads federal government, but I understand they're not keen to support any coalition that includes DAP. So what happens if Pakatan Harapan does come into power?
No. When I said they join whoever is in federal government, I don't mean as a join formally. They will be an ally. So like Warisand was an ally of Pakatan Harapan. They were not a former member. GPS is a former ally of Perikatan Nasional, but they're not a former member. So that is really not a problem, because what you can do is you can say that I will support you, make sure you stay in government, but these are my set of minimum requirements. You support me on autonomy, you support me on additional budget, you support me MS63. So as long as we have a clear understanding of all these issues and you can deliver, there's no problem in our MPs supporting you in Parliament.
So Sabah-based Warisand also seems keen to contest seats in the peninsula to court the Sabahan community here. How do you think this will play out?
I think the Sabahans and the Sarawakian community in Malaya, Peninsula Malaysia, would welcome Warisand. I think there's a sense that they've been isolated from Peninsula Malaysia parties. But again, their numbers are so small, I don't think they'll make a difference. I think the key difference for Warisand is more symbolic. This is the first time a major party from East Malaysia or Sabah and Sarawak has tried to become mainstream in Peninsula Malaysia. I think symbolically it's extremely important, but I think it'll be very difficult for them to try to penetrate the Malay votes. I think they will be more receptive in the urban areas. I think there is a sizable number of people who think that maybe it's time to look towards East Malaysian political leadership, because things are not working out in Peninsula Malaysia. There's too much racial politics, too much religious politics. Maybe we should try to look towards East Malaysia. But I think in terms of the core Malay areas, I think they will have a hard time penetrating it.
So what do you foresee will be the outcomes of the Sarawak state election?
Right now, my forecast is that GPS will probably win. The question is really the margin of victory.
Do you expect it to be a bigger margin?
No. The last time they got 72 out of 82 seats. I don't expect it to do better than that.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning, James. That was Professor James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania, giving us a very interesting look into Sabah and Sarawak and, mainly Sarawak, and how its relationship with Perikatan Nasional is going to hold up as we head into elections, national elections. I think, his point about Warisand coming over here would be quite interesting. I would certainly be interested to see whether or not, they can find some synergistic place in terms of bridging these East and West Malaysia politics, because then perhaps it could lead further down the line to a more cohesive political landscape, not so much of a divide between Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak.
Or will it just weaken Pakatan Harapan, leading to more cannibalization and just more fragmented politics? Who knows at this point? But one thing we do know is that everybody loves a winner, as James put it so eloquently there, and then this has always been the case. Sarawak will back the federal government in play. Not formally, they've never, like Sabah and Sarawak parties have never officially joined a coalition, right? It's always we are friendly with with the government of the day. I remember even during when Perikatan came into power, the newly formed GPS, renamed GPS at that point, said we are not opposed, but we're not formally part of. We are just we're friendly to the federal government, and that's, I guess, how they've always played it.
Yeah, allied, as James pointed out. So, quite interesting to see how this is going to play out, particularly since the Prime Minister was just there to court Sarawak particularly. The question really is, as James was talking about, the fact that all this racial rhetoric may play reasonably well in Sabah, where there is a strong kind of the Malay politicians have quite a strong political support, but it doesn't necessarily play well in Sarawak. So how is that going to turn out for Bersatu?
Well, I'm quite interested in his comments. He says GPS is expected to win in the Sarawak state elections, but he doesn't expect them to do better. So I guess if we had more time, we really want to explore that angle.
Yeah, so that will be interesting to see. It will also be interesting to see when the Sarawak state elections will happen, because it's supposed to happen this year.
I think by August. I think they need to do it by then. Technically
speaking, it should happen by then.
But then emergency.
But then there are all sorts of things are different right now. All things are. Parliament's not even in play, so we'll see how it plays out. And also, there are always going to be concerns over the COVID-19 situation, and the messaging coming out is that what was on the NSC's front page this morning, that not lives, that the priority will be lives, and that seems to be the messaging that's coming out. So let's see what happens this year.
All right, but right now we are about to head into the 8 o'clock news bulletin, and then after that, the Breakfast Grill, where Wong Xiaoning will be speaking with Louis George Lasonari, Chief Executive of Zwelik Pharma Malaysia and Brunei. So be sure to stay tuned for that conversation after the news. BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.